We are the result of a sexually transmitted biological drive. It's the absolute baseline of life. To ensure the human species wouldn't simply die out, nature had to guarantee that we would actually participate in the reproductive process. To do that, it built in a powerful incentive. It wired an intense physical pleasure into the act, essentially creating a biological addiction. If that profound pull wasn't hard-coded into our bodies, it's highly unlikely early humans would have bothered with the exhausting ordeal of procreation. The consequence of this wiring is that the moment puberty hits and hormones flood the system, our baseline intelligence is hijacked. Suddenly, a totally standard bodily function overrides logic, pulling our focus entirely toward finding a mate. Because this evolutionary override is so incredibly forceful, we end up confusing a basic survival mechanism with who we actually are. We take a basic element of our physical biology and elevate it into the defining characteristic of our personal identity. Adding to this internal confusion is the intense pressure of modern society. We're constantly fed the idea that if a relationship lacks physical intimacy, it isn't a real relationship at all. The culture insists that, to be considered normal, you must be actively driven by these desires. At the exact same time, we inherit a contradictory set of traditional and religious rules. These older frameworks look at the very same biological instincts and label them as sinful, dirty, or something to be deeply ashamed of. You are caught in a bizarre crossfire. You're told you must indulge to fit in, but you're also told you should feel guilty for even having the urge. Bouncing between these two extremes leaves people frustrated, living as stressed-out slaves to their own biology. Faced with this tension, the most common response is absolute compulsion. The internal logic is straightforward. If the body is hardwired for pleasure, then maximizing that physical output should equate to a life well lived. But the human body is a highly limited machine. Left entirely to its own devices, it only knows two commands: survive and procreate. No matter how much you indulge it, the physical form is finite, steadily walking step by step toward the grave. Consider the life of the legendary footballer George Best. In his youth, he had access to what society considers absolute peak pleasure. He was globally idolized and had a continuous string of famous models and actresses on his arm. Yet treating his life as an endless pursuit of physical gratification didn't lead to joy. The constant, compulsive drive to feed that bodily addiction exhausted him. By the time he was in his mid-30s, he was a deeply broken, frustrated, and miserable man. When a finite bodily function is forced to provide the entire foundation for a person's meaning, the math eventually fails. As the novelty of the sensation wears off and the body continues its inevitable walk toward the grave, the person is left with a deepening sense of frustration that more pleasure cannot fix. Seeing the dangers of compulsion, many try the exact opposite route. They adopt rigid ascetic practices, attempting to push down, ignore, or aggressively shame their own biological urges out of existence. But human sexuality is an enormous, primal energy. You cannot simply cap it and expect it to vanish. When you subject that natural instinct to intense psychological pressure, it doesn't disappear, it fractures and mutates. Eventually, the vessel breaks. That repressed energy violently forces its way out, finding new, highly destructive, and often perverted channels that completely overwhelm a person's rational intelligence. Blindly feeding the addiction and aggressively fighting the addiction fail for the exact same reason. In both scenarios, the human being has no actual agency. The physical instinct is doing all the driving. There is a third option. In ancient traditions, true Tantra was never about maximizing physical indulgence. It was a precise psychological practice designed to meet a primal urge with pure, still observation. The technique requires exact execution. When a physical impulse flares up, you don't act on it immediately. You also don't fight it or judge yourself for having it. You simply sit and sense it. You become the awareness watching the impulse. Think of it like waking up in the middle of the night with an intense craving to eat. You find yourself standing in the dark, your hand already resting on the handle of the refrigerator door. Instead of yanking the door open or fiercely scolding yourself for being hungry, you just stop. You sit down for 2 minutes and fully feel the need. As you watch without acting, the intense urge rapidly fades away. Meeting the impulse with pure awareness breaks the compulsive loop. You allow the physical sensation to arise, but strip away its power to force your behavior. This chart shows how we typically budget our total life energy. Right now, many of us allow the biological drive to take up an irrationally huge slice of the pie. But your life force is a strictly limited economic resource, much like a monthly salary. The reproductive instinct is meant to be just one, very small line item in that budget. When you stop bankrupting your daily energy on compulsive thoughts and actions, you free up massive amounts of capital. You gain the internal resources to consciously allocate your life force toward genuine companionship, creativity, and profound joy. We are all born out of biological necessity. You did not choose the animal instincts that came pre-installed in your body. But as a human being, you possess the intelligence to choose exactly how you respond to them. By choosing quiet observation over immediate reaction, you stop being a passenger held hostage by your own chemistry. You take the wheel, and you become the conscious driver of your life.